Okay, so welcome everybody. Lee Cox is a fellow Brit. Probably when you start speaking, you realize his accent's very different from mine. He's in the south of England. I'm obviously in Georgia at the moment, down at Sea Island. And Lee, I've followed online, have a mutual friend. Very much from how I know you, Lee, is from looking at the World Long Drive guys and working with them. And it's something I've studied for a long time, but not to the same level you have. But I've always tried to get players to hit the ball further. And honestly, it's cost me a number of tour players working with them over the years, but now it seems like all of a sudden long drive is more in vogue, the things that Bryson done. So I just want to kind of have a chat and see some of the things that you've done and also make people aware of what you do, because I think you're a phenomenal resource for a world in which we're going into. So welcome, thanks for doing this. Just give me a little, tell me, I know where you are, but tell people where you are and a little background on how you do what you do.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, good to talk to you, Dan. Thanks for having me on. So I'm based in London, in North London, and I've been in this area. Unlike you, I haven't moved that far away, John. I've sort of stayed in the same sort of local vicinity. And I've been teaching, I've been a PGA pro for probably almost 30 years now. And I had a reputation in coaching, and I was teaching mainly sort of good players and recreational players. And about 20 years ago, I had an interest in long drive. I come from a sporty family, and my dad did a bit of boxing, cricket, football. I did football with my mum, and my sister's a PE teacher. So the sport appealed to me. And at that point, Joe Miller, maybe 20 years ago, his father asked me to, could I help him to have a go at long drive? So I agreed to everything and got in the car and realised I knew nothing, John. Yeah, so it was one of those things that I didn't know at that initial point. Also, I was a lucky man. I was given a freak of nature who went on to win 2 world titles, and I did a silly thing. I agreed that he didn't have to pay me until he won a world title. Looking back, it was crazy, but he did win 2 world titles. So
that's good.
In the end, it worked out. But it sparked off an interest in a subject that I really liked. And from the early days of a very crude way of, because there wasn't any long drive really in the UK, I started looking at swing sequences, training routines, ball flight optimation wasn't around at that point. TrackMan didn't come out till about 2008. I was looking at, trying to get some view on the ball flight, which we're working on equipment. So I started attacking it from many different angles. So I was teaching at that point sort of amateurs, very decent players, and then I got into the long drive, which appealed to me. And I know these days a lot of pros specialise in different subjects, whether it's putting. It was one of those things that appealed to me. We have a great putting coach right next door to where I work. Yeah, I couldn't be a putting coach. It doesn't quite excite me, but he loves it. So I think pros these days have a bit of a niche, but I think you need to get into a niche that excites your interest you a bit.
100%. I mean, you've got to. It has to be a passion first of all, isn't it? Because you're going to go down many areas that are not correct. So it's going to take a while to get to where you want to get to. So the World Long Drive guy you worked with the most initially was Joe Miller. I guess that's how I started hearing your name when you said 20 years ago, Joe Miller. So I didn't realize you worked with Joe that long. I mean, I've obviously seen him win the World Championships, but how old was he when you started working with him?
He was about 17. He was about 17 years old, and he was about 11 stone, John. Yeah.
Okay. So 150,
60
60 pounds, maybe. I got to think.
Yeah, right. At his heaviest, he got up to 22 stone.
Oh my God.
He got very, very, very much into the weightlifting, and bodybuilding, but he actually was a bit slower at that weight, John. So his best weight is about 18.5 stone. He's a big man. He doesn't really look, if you know what I mean, he doesn't really look 18.5. He's not got a lot of weight on him, but he's just a big, strong guy. Yeah. So he very much got into the physical part, became a PT himself, and went down very much the training route. But at that time, he was a decent player, but he didn't really have the accuracy that you needed for long drive, and he didn't really have a long drive swing in those days.
Got it. And people don't realize, I mean, these guys are very accurate. They just hit so far. The dispersion is tiny, isn't it, at that range?
Exactly. Because I've been lucky enough to teach an awful lot of good players, the straightest hitter I've ever measured on my launch monitor is Joe Miller.
That's crazy.
he hits it straighter than anyone. However, when you watch him on telly, he's doing long drive. His normal drive on the course is about 140 miles an hour. That's him not hitting it very hard. That man is a great driver of the ball.
So that's interesting. So a lot of guys you're working with, their club speed is faster than most golfers' ball speed, easily faster than most club golfers, obviously, and pretty good golfers. So just so people know, I mean, a PGA Tour average, I think now is 115 miles an hour, somewhere in that area. And you're what numbers are you looking at before they're even competitive? They've got to be in the upper 130s before you even think about it, don't you?
In the old days, 200 miles an hour ball speed was probably the minimum requirement, which from a clubhead speed is about 135 miles an hour. Yes. So 135 is about the minimum stop. And obviously I'm in Europe, so the European competition, there's the top guys who are excellent, but we've got maybe a few guys who are lesser who will be competitive in Europe at about 135. To be competitive in America, you probably need 145 clubhead speed to be competitive and 210 ball speed. So a slightly higher level if you're coming over to the States to compete.
Got it. And then Martin, I don't want to butcher his last name, but Martin Borgmeyer, is that who you're working with too at the moment?
Yes, so Martin Borgmeyer is probably the fastest man on the planet at the moment. So he's got a quad. Now, you know that quad slightly exaggerates clubhead speed.
Yes.
But he was up at 165 clubhead speed on quad.
Wow.
So now that's probably worth 160 on TrackMan, and he holds the world ball speed record as well at 231.9.
And if people haven't seen him, he looks like the guy at the Game of Thrones to me. He's one of the men from the north. He's a specimen.
And he's a beast. The one thing, John, as you know, is that because I made my name in long drive, I get lucky. I get given exceptionally good people. Yeah, I get given freaks to work with. Yeah.
Yes.
So Martin came into me at about 139 clubhead speed, and he's got up to 165. So, but he was a specimen. He played basketball at a very high level. As a kid, he played off a one handicap at golf. So as in keeping with all of those guys, but typical of a German, he's got the great attitude to work very hard. Yeah. And the man puts every single bit of what he can do into his long drive. So not only is he an athlete and a freak of nature, as I would call him, he's got that work ethic that champions have.
Yeah, they're dedicated for sure, those guys. One of the things you just said there, like he played basketball. What have you seen some other commonalities in crossover sports that people have played? Over here, if people have played ice hockey, I'm always excited because that makes my life easier. Basketball for the vertical jump and that kind of thing. But have you seen anything particularly get you excited on? They say they do this and that.
It's interesting. Obviously, being in Europe, we don't play baseball, and we don't play ice hockey, particularly. Yes. So I know I teach obviously a few long drive guys out in America, and most of them are coming out of baseball backgrounds, or ice hockey backgrounds. The Canadians have worked with. So there's obviously a correlation between those two sports coming into it. From what I see of the guys I've worked with, Joe was very good at athletics. James Tate is a guy who played high level baseball and rugby.
Okay.
So it seems to be from the guys in Europe where the background of the sports is different. It's a multi-sport background, bit of basketball, bit of football, bit of athletics. A few of the guys have done a bit of javelin, bit of shot, but those sports seem to correlate great to distance. And a multi-sport background does that, but a little different to where you are because of the sports we play over here.
Yeah, the throwing sports for me, actually, the pitchers in baseball are easier for me to coach than the hitters. I mean, the pitchers have to create one of the things I always tell them, proximal, center of body to distance speed. And if you can throw a ball at 95 miles an hour, you certainly know how to make the club move around your body pretty well.
And if you look at the sort of the top 20 long drive guys in the world, many of them are American, a lot of them are from that baseball pitching. So a lot of them have come from that background. And Carl Walter, who was a famous long drive champion, was a javelin thrower as well, at a very, very high level. So certainly those will correlate to being good for distance.
So I've got ideas on javelin. What have you seen? Because I agree completely on javelin. What have you seen, or what do you how would you cross over those two things, from javelin to hitting a golf ball? Obviously, a very different skill looking at it, but from our world, we're transferring energy, aren't we? That's what we're doing.
Exactly. And if you look at, I haven't studied javelin in a huge amount to know all the exact movements, but as you were saying, the body movement, getting speed out to the arm, and then getting speed out into the javelin. So that chain of events. The only one I looked at, the Indian guy who won the Olympics this year, the javelin, which was the first, I think, Olympic medal for gold. I looked at his action, was unbelievable. And I think even Kelvin Mihira, who I knew many years ago, but was interested in a guy called Jan Zalesny, who was like the king of javelin, if you might remember him from the 80s.
I know that name, yes. Yeah.
And he threw the rule book out the window because he was throwing, falling over. He landed on his hands when he threw the javelin. And it went against all of the original ideas of javelin. And for not a big man, he was unbeatable for a period, Zalesny. So this sort of took me back a little bit to when I first got involved in long drive. And the first few swings, I thought, well, he's jumping around a bit, and his feet are moving. Yeah. And then I was a great collector of books and history of golf. And then I look back at the swings of the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I started to see similar footwork a little bit of the big hitters of that time. And then we know from being our age, the 90s was a little bit keep the feet steady, lower half, yeah?
Yes.
So it very much went away from what I was thinking when I was a player in the 90s of cutting out all my leg action. So one of those first things that we're talking for the javelin, that sort of throwing over, jumping around, using all the movements, huge sort of extension back here of that arm.
Yes.
But when I first started seeing very fast players, I started seeing movements that I wasn't seeing with less fast players as such, if that's good English.
Yeah, no, I get it. And one of the I define balance as the ability to catch yourself, not the ability to stand still. And I think we're probably similar age. I mean, looking at Faldo in the 80s and 90s, that he was the man controlling his middle irons, and now he's not even playing the Champions Tour because he can't even. There may be other reasons, but he's not long enough to compete with those guys. And so the game's definitely shifted, hasn't it, on how people are thinking about playing.
Yeah, there was an interesting thing. I found a magazine from the 70s, and they had the long drive competition. And Faldo won it. It was a tour competition. Now, interestingly, because if you stood next to him, he's a big man, yeah?
Very big, yeah. I met him, yeah.
Now, what you'll actually see is he stripped his power away to control it. Now, who could argue, what did he win, 6 majors?
Yes, he did,
now,
yeah.
I've heard him since say that he wished he'd gone another way and gone for power, but he's still the most successful British player of all time. So It probably was the right decision. But at one time, he was a big hitter. But it's a bit like if you train yourself out of it, sometimes it's difficult to find the magic. The genie's out the bottle. We can't get it back. So it would be difficult for him to turn back full cycle on that.
And it's definitely a mental approach, isn't it? I mean, you have to give up some feeling of control when you're going to try and do this stuff. I think a lot of people switching to the amateurs for a minute, they want both, unfortunately, and you're just not going to get both initially. You got to kind of pull the trigger and go with it a little bit, don't you?
There's a very interesting I found in the early days. You heard of Carl Welty, the famous the pioneer of video? Yeah, and I saw a video many years ago, and there was a Daly one, there was a Greg Norman one, and a Davis Love.
Yes.
And a French couples he got as well, but he got many of the tour players. I think he was based in Florida. And he measured the guys in his teaching bay in his studio, and Davis Love and John Daly were faster than Greg Norman. Yeah. So they were swinging that about 123, 124. Greg Norman was 119. But when he put them on the course, Daly and Davis Love were playing at about 116, but Greg Norman still was playing at 119. As we can picture Greg Norman, he did look like he wasn't holding too much back. Yes. So what we know is that most players play at about 92% of their potential. Okay. Now, the interesting thing from trying to add speed to someone is that to try and add speed, you probably need to get them to learn to hit it 100%. So one of the things I found early on is if you're training for speed, hitting in the net is probably much better than hitting into a range or somewhere where you're worried about the ball flight. Yes. And I found it interesting to see Bryson alluding to the fact that he went through COVID hitting into a net because he gave away his inhibitions about where the ball was going. And one of the things that certainly, if an amateur was watching this and to build speed, it's not about trying to hit it really, really hard. Greg Norman can do that because the rest of the world can't. It's that's your peak speed and that's your playing speed. If you can move this number up, your peak speed, it will drag your playing speed up.
Yes.
And one of the things I found interesting from if you train for speed from a physical point of view in the gym, generally less is more. You want to do low reps. But I found hitting balls with Joe 15, 20 years ago that he started to hit sort of 50 balls, 100, 150, 200. He was at 3 balls a day. And Sean Pfister, the great long drive legend, always, whether it's true or a myth, said he hit 400 balls a day. So that went contrary to normal speed training. But very much I've realised now is that hitting a lot of balls prepares your body to take more impact.
Yes.
And get more speed up from hitting balls. So for an amateur, don't go out and hit 500 balls.
Yeah.
But maybe just get your quantity for next time you go down the range from 10 balls to 20, then get it up to 30, then maybe get it up to 50. Amateurs aren't going to be able to hit 300 balls. And don't be frightened to have a few weeks in the net, not worrying about where the ball's going, not worrying about the results. It will make massive difference. And sometimes when people come and ask, how am I going to get longer? I'm not going to give them this biomechanical anatomy thing. Just do the easy things first, yeah?
Right, yeah.
Just try quantity, get in that net a little bit. We can talk a little bit about training aids in a second. And those are the things that I found that, you could get a little bit of distance out quite quickly and get away about the worry about hitting a fairway for a few weeks. And, in the UK, we're sort of heading towards winter. Those things are often a great winter project.
Yes.
When you're not playing and all your matches are finished and your match plays are done, and you can have a bit of time off from competitions and thinking about, just adding a bit of speed over the winter.
Yeah, and I like what you said there. I mean, there's so many, like for you, and I've done a lot of it too. There's so many kind of easy wins. At the biomechanical level, you're really trying to get the last 1 or 2, 10% out maybe, but at the amateur level, there's so many things you could see with your eye. You don't need machines to measure. You've seen it enough now, haven't you? You don't need to delve in very deep. Just like simple things like we can have a very interesting conversation about it, but you just got to get people out and do it, don't you? I mean, there's a very big difference between intellectually understanding something and them being able to do it. And
exactly, 100%. And it's, as you said, it's the easy things that people could do that add speed. They don't have to often rip their swing apart and completely change what they're doing. And, they can keep their model that they've got and just teach it. And if I had someone coming in as an amateur, I would think, what could I do first of all that doesn't really interfere too much with what they're doing? So could I use this model and make it go faster?
Yeah.
Could I then make a couple of simple changes that aren't going to spoil too much that could make it go? And I suppose my advantage, I guess I could call it mechanical advantage. What could I change in someone's swing that might make it go faster with the least intrusive, not trying to spoil their game? And I guess from experience, just because I've been around long driving, you said at the beginning, long drive originally was seen as a bit of a freak show and not relevant to golf. You don't need a long drive swing, but you might pick tiny little elements from what a long driver does and implement that in your own swing that won't be that intrusive to what you're doing.
Yeah. So just go down that path a little bit. I mean, one of the things that I look at is I've looked at a lot of 3D stuff and there's a lot of it is annoying to me over here because there's a lot of people telling people to rotate faster. And I don't want to lead the jury here a little bit, but I think that is one of the elements. But in general, we've got to get energy to, like you said, the javelin, to the outside, to the club, don't we? So what do you see? Like if you see somebody initially, are you looking at rotational speeds or are you looking at the entire transfer of energy?
So on a daily basis, people will come to me and look at speed and I say, what can I do with my swing? And there's something with amateurs that this myth that it's all about rotational speed. Now we know it's a rotational sport. Now, because you've done a lot of 3D, you'll know that lady pros hip speeds generally can be faster than men pros hip speed.
I tell people a lot that, yes, yeah.
So we know it's a tiny piece of the jigsaw, but it's not. So I would start, and this is what you said about proximity to distal earlier, about getting the speed out. Most long drivers, men or ladies, all of them, I said most, all of them have the fastest lead arms on the planet. They have very, very fast lead arms.
Got it.
So how I've always viewed adding speed, if you were looking at what you do, what could I do to make your lead arm go faster?
Okay, good.
Secondary to that, if we look at 3D, there's some interesting stuff that Rory McIlroy has very fast hips, as we know.
Yes.
But he has a very fast lead arm. So if I was starting with someone, I'll be thinking, okay, what could I possibly do to get their lead arm traveling faster? We know, though, that if Rory McIlroy has a faster lead arm than JB Holmes has the same clubhead speed, because there's also this slight intellectual black hole that JB Holmes can accelerate the shaft faster than Rory in the latter part of the swing.
Yes.
So I would then think, can I get the lead arm? And I know, I don't know if I'm going to share this data, but I know that Bryson has the same arm speed as Carl Berkshire. But
yes.
Carl Berkshire can actually generate more speed still than Bryson. So there's another bit of magic in there anyway. But exactly as you said, hip rotational speed is a bit of the jigsaw. So if someone wasn't turning at all, you want to add a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But when I always say, and I know that Rory McIlroy's hips rotational speed is faster than a few long drive guys. So there's something else that they do that allows them to get this lead arm going very fast. And then the other bit of magic is how can they get speed out to the other end of the golf club?
Yes. And have you looked a lot, like I get stuck in looking at, because I've done 3D, I've seen so much of the trail arm, which is hidden really on video. But
Yes.
The structure of the trail arm, and like you said a little while ago, thinking about Javelin, they're not throwing the Javelin from here. They're getting that as far away as possible, aren't they? So have you looked at that a lot as a contributing factor? I've probably looked at everything at this point, haven't you?
Yeah, so I know from Mark Ball 3D that, so say in a normal sort of golf swing, say my arm is at 90 degrees to my chest as such.
Mm-hmm.
I know every long drive guy I've ever seen, and Dustin Johnson and many of them, have some shoulder abduction. So if I move to the side here, that was the top swing. They do have some motion here.
Yes.
Mark Ball, I know, has measured that this motion of shoulder abduction and shoulder blade scapular movement across the back can allow you to apply more force in the first motion on the way down.
Okay.
So I certainly know from a long drive is a little different, that you'll move your arm away, you'll get loads of radial. And this is some bits that are great and some bits that aren't. Nearly every long drive guy has an extended wrist at the top.
Yes.
Don't do that at home. It's not the greatest thing to do, but it's really good for long drive, yeah?
Yeah.
But to your point, I've noticed every long drive guy has very high hands.
Yes.
Help with what TPI call vertical chop and other factors.
Yeah.
Then you can get your lats to pull your hands down. But the position of the trail arm, exactly as you alluded to, will help. And I don't believe this is ever measured, but I believe this is that if we know that arm speed or hand speed is created in the first part of your downswing,
yeah,
I do believe that the slight opening of the arm and some potential movement here does help to speed the lead arm up in the early part of the downswing. So I agree with you.
Okay, good. I mean,
your findings on that, John?
Yeah, no, that does. And I noticed when I started looking at 3D, I that's one of the things I tell people when I present to PGA. It's like the highest hip speed I see in the professional tours has a correlation to the lowest club speed, and that's the LPGA. So clearly it's upper body strength and those kind of things. But
yeah,
I see and you think about juniors and ladies, they are jumping all over the place and moving their hips, but the club isn't going very quickly. So there's a lot of energy lost between the start and the end in most golfers. And then the link that I found from looking at it when I started measuring tour pros, their right arm never bent more than, or I shouldn't say never, but rarely bent more than 90 degrees and started to straighten very, very early in the downswing. And like you just said, if you're applying pressure against something, the club is then going to look like it lags more, basically. They're not leaving the club behind. They're applying force against that grip, aren't they? And I know that there's a lot of things talked about right now about kind of, not pulling the club down, but I know we've got to get the thing going from up here to sort of like 8 o'clock on a watch face pretty quickly.
Yes.
We've got to do something to it, don't we? We can't just let it hang around. It doesn't do itself.
No, exactly. So there has to be, I know from 3D data that, the chest turns into the left arm as you could use. This is going to give you a stretch across your shoulder complex. But I don't know if that's a great teaching idea.
Yeah.
In the fact that I know that happens, and I know that, you know, in most sequences they unwind, you know, hips, shoulders, lead arm, club. But sometimes those thoughts, if you're thinking 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I think you've got to think in terms of getting these hands going down very quickly. I know from the fastest guys I've measured that the hand path tends to go out a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, from tracking hub path or hand path. And I know if you can make that journey longer outwards, and certainly the long drive guys curve it more, that would have a better releasing effect on the club. So in what you were saying about the lead arm position in this angle, and as I said there about it moving out, I believe that entirely for producing great hub path, or that just means the shape of your hands down, and that has a big bearing on your ability to accrue speed as well.
So they're taking the club essentially and trying to send it away from the target, starting
outwards
down
in the first bit. And we know on 2D cameras it doesn't quite look that way because they're also shifting forward a little bit.
Yeah.
But they certainly, the idea of pulling it in is pretty poisonous, I think. I think you've got to get it going out.
Well, I was with Bryson actually and Chris Comer back in February, and we had Crowell Berkshire's data. So we had hand speeds and everything, and we had Bryson's, and Bryson's hand speed and acceleration were the same as Kyle's, but Kyle's clubhead speed was greater. And I said to Bryson, I said to Chris, hey, you know, he looks like he's trying to come this way. Like Bryson was saying, you know, that the ice skaters come this way. And I said, yeah, but we're not on ice, we're on grass. We have friction. And I said, you know, you got to feel it this way. He goes, no, I can't do that. And so Chris agreed with me, but he said, yeah, he's not there yet. So, but it was like his hand path didn't go as far that way. So Bryson was accelerating as much, but he wasn't getting the club to go out as much as he came through.
And exactly as we said earlier, in those arm speeds, there's a little bit of magic in how, and there's a little bit of an intellectual black hole that a lot of people don't quite know, the scientists, how some players can accelerate the shaft quicker from that period of time. They believe it's to do with the hub path, angular motion of the club going out, but there's a bit of an intellectual black hole in exactly how that happens. But some people have the magic, you know. Martin Borgmeier, I know, has very fast arm speed, but he's obviously able to get it out to that club head. He does some bit of magic here that's able to do that, which obviously Carl's can do that a little bit quicker than Bryson can.
Yes. Okay. So generally, if you were telling somebody, hey, you just want to hit it further, just this action, trying to get from where the hands start as far up here as possible, that will be one of the things that you would train for, look at.
So we know from a kinetics point of view, kinetics is, as we know, the forces you put on the club. And if you look at the scientists, one of them will say that linear work is the main factor in generating speed. Linear work is just how far your hands travel in space. So the old analogy is if you were pushing a car that was broken down, the further you could push it, or the more people were pushing it, you could do that. And the second bit is angular work, which is how the club swings around the clock. Now, we know long drive guys tap into both. They get very long hand paths and angular work. I'm not a scientist. I don't know who's right or wrong, but I certainly know on the teaching tee, I might say, you know, I might try and lengthen someone's hand path. The next person, I might try and get them to swing it a bit, and through a little bit of trial and error. And one of the things with speed training, and I know when I was a coach at as a youngster, I'd have an idea. Okay, I'm going to work on this today, and it might be going badly, John. But I keep going with it. Going with it because I was young and I thought I'm going to look silly here. As I've got older, I'm quite happy after 5 minutes to say, this ain't working. This ain't working. I'm going to give you a refund for that 5 minutes of rubbish I was talking, and let's get back to something else. So I became much more comfortable in the fact that, you know, let's try a few things. Let's see how they work. If they don't work, we'll leave them alone. That may be for another day, and we'll try something else. But as I've got older, I was quite happy to try a couple of different bits. But potentially the person at home, if they could, you know, get the hands working a little bit longer, or possibly swing it more around the clock, that's certainly a pretty good way to try and find an easy little bit of speed out of it.
Okay, cool. I know I've had this conversation with John Novosel a little bit about he likes having something to impact when you're like, you know, hitting into something, and he said you are similar with that. Are you Talk a bit
Yeah.
about that if you would.
So, 15 years ago, I was aware of overload over speed training.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did is, and I still think this is quite good. And I need to invent this bit, yeah. But I'll go through the story. So I had an old wooden club, yeah, and I drilled a couple of little holes in it, yeah. I made one too light. I drilled too many holes, and then I got a friend of mine, a club repairman, to put a little bit of lead in one. So I had a very cheap, like a £5 wood with the holes in it, and one doing. I was swinging with that, yeah.
Yeah.
Then I was lucky, first man in Europe to have super speeds. I got set in 2014. They came out of the long drive business. So I see people doing studies with them. I'm lucky. I've used them with thousands and thousands of people. Now, if you're a mid to high handicap, you can get some really big, very quick gains out of it, yeah?
Good.
Because a lot of people are performing so far below their athletic potential, just an even shocking the system into a little bit of training, they'll do it. Now, the one thing I found, and I use them regularly in my training. So I then put them in a pro's hand, and then I got the pro. I worked with him I've done this with hundreds of pros. You go with it. You do. So how's those speeds coming on? Really, really good, yeah? Got them back on my launch monitor, and they're the same speed, yeah?
Yeah.
So then sort of get into it. Okay, but, I've got to pay my mortgage this week, and I want to just try and make a check, and I really did want to hit that fairway. So what I found with the least success was with the better players, weirdly. So I thought it would make a difference. But then when you think about it, they've got their patterns, their timings, their movements, their beliefs, their shot shapes. They love hitting. Yeah. So it started to make sense to me. So what I then, at a golf club, do you know when the buggies come back and people leave their head covers in it?
Yes. Yeah,
so
yeah.
I grabbed the head cover out of that, and I've got the long drive guys hitting head covers, yeah? So I thought, this is working quite well, yeah? So then I put 2 head covers together, elastic bands. Then I got 3, and so I was building it up. And then I was certain I'd invented something. And then I met John Novosel, who'd already done it. Yeah. So I now believe 100% that you need some impact to hit. My dad boxed a bit. My granddad boxed a bit. They need pads. You need something to hit. I'm a big believer in it.
Okay.
Now, this doesn't mean I think that super speeds are of no value. So in my training now, and I've bought every speed training gadget ever, yeah?
Yeah.
So yeah. I like, this is what I like. I like a bit of Mach 3. There's 2 or 3 gadgets I like in that.
Yes. Yeah.
I then use a bit of Mach 3. I then use super speed to shock the system, get some usable speed. And then I turn it, then I go to John's stuff. Now, if you use John's stuff, Speedball and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So I like John's Speedball. I love the pads he does, yeah. What I've also now done, John, is I've got an old driver. Now, because I'm lucky, I get drivers.
Yes.
I've got an old driver, so I use John's Speedball, but now I've got a driver that I've Velcroed the face of.
Oh, okay.
I love to hit that, John, because it's my driver with my grip and my shaft and my head on.
Yeah.
So I've got Speedball, and then I transfer that to my driver. And I love that because I'm swinging my driver. But resistance training, I think, is a must. From all the studies I've done with it, if it was me looking at money was no object for buying stuff, I would have super speed.
Yeah.
I would then have the pads. Okay. And for me, that's the bridge from super speed to bring the usable speed at super speed into hitting objects.
So that's John's stuff, the pads.
Correct. Now, again, I had it with head covers. I've had bits of foam. Now, the last few weeks, I've been using my old wooden club with the drilled head, yeah?
Yes.
To hit that into the pads, but I've also been hitting shots of it. I quite like it. Early days of trying it, but it's the cheapest training aid in the world. It's an old wooden club with a couple of drilled holes. There's a heavy one, and I'm hitting those into the pads and hitting balls with it. Early days of trying it, but I think there's something there.
Have you seen a difference in speed when I've gone from the overspeed stuff where there's no club head, there's no face to square?
Yeah.
Now people have a face. It seems like that almost distracts them sometimes, where they're trying to square something versus swing through something.
100%, John. And the worst ones are the really good players, the pros.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think John's a tempo man as well. I think their tempos, their whole mindset is set on hitting that ball. Yeah. And for me, if you take the super speed away and give them something to hit, they will go back, even if they're trained, they're identical hitting speed. So if you're going to do that, not so much amateurs, because amateurs, if they hit it big, they haven't got to make a check for the weekend. They just got to go home to the wife.
Exactly.
So they're quite happy to give it. And if they hit one good shot, it's a good talk in the bar afterwards. But it's really the good players I see who suffer the most. I would then have them in hitting pads, hitting resistance. For me, that is the magic. I 100% believe and agree with John on that.
So have you seen, do you think that's some loss of energy low in the swing where that kind of the having to hit something here versus just swinging through something? With the speed sticks, we keep the speed going longer. Have you any thoughts on that, or why?
And John, what was the first bit?
So so the overspeed stuff with no face on it, they're kind of swinging through a range, aren't they? Whereas when there's a club on there.
I don't know. I've got a flight scope and I use the sort of PIGRs, the little traders. I don't actually know on my flight scope, because the reason I use flight scope is it has this swing training mode where it measures practice swings.
Okay, got it. Good.
I don't actually know, and no one's been able to tell me yet, whether it's measuring pre-ball, where the ball would be, or after the ball.
Got it.
So I don't actually know. So then I don't know whether the person's intent of hitting it is at which part of the swing. So for me, the other thing I think, which is what you were saying, is that when there's a pad there in the appropriate position of where a ball would be, we then know that the speed is being accrued at the exact time where the ball would be. Where with the super speed without the face and without knowing exactly where it's measuring, it's a vague area. As I said, I think they're very good, but I think in my view, they need to be backed up with hitting something which has the correct resistance and at the right position to accrue the speed at the right time where the ball would be.
Great. So if you were training somebody, would you move the ball? Would you move the pad sort of to the right a bit and then move it further forward? Where would you just always put the pad where the impact needs to be?
Yeah, good point, John. I've never considered that. I would always have the pad. I actually, I've got a rubber tee in my mat, and I actually rest the pad against the rubber tee.
Okay, good. Okay.
Any different to that? So yeah, it's a good point. I've always put it at the point where I think they're going to hit the ball. I've never changed it. I never thought about it.
Got it. Okay. And yeah, so it's always been interesting to me. Like, are they like? Do we tell people to swing through that point, or I still like you said, some people respond to different things. So I don't think there's an absolute on that by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
And, do you use an impact bag, or is that just too heavy? You know, the old bags we used to use. I think they help with alignment, but I never saw those correlate to speed really.
No, I don't think it. I think they're too heavy. I use an impact bag, which over the years I think can help with release patterns and can help with some sort of club face stability and how you're going to be here. I believe that they're too heavy to actually help with any speed. So
so there's a lot of things I would say we use that are giving the right concept, but they're not actually producing the outcome, are they? It's kind of that. And I've had an impact bag for years, but it sits there most of the time. I'll maybe use it, but yeah, I never find that correlation. And it sounds like we're the same. I'm always looking for things like people ask me about drills. It's like they're great, but I need them to be able to correlate to something. I don't just want busy work. I want things that are effective.
Yeah, exactly. And I know some training aids that you might use, they're okay, but then you take them away and the person then will just go back to what they're doing, because for me they're not working in the right way from that point of view. So if you're training or you're using an aid, it has to be giving you some benefit. And certainly, impact bags I did try for a long time. I do use them to help with releases, but I don't think they help from a speed perspective. They're too heavy, slow the club down, and I don't see any speed benefit from them.
Okay, cool. And so just going back a little bit, the left arm speed is one of the biggest differentiators, as you said. So the arm is pinned against the chest a bit, or the chest is moving into the arm. What kind of stuff do you do to try and get arm speed moving?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So if you weren't going to change your swing, so let's start it from that point of view, yeah. So there are some single arm trainers on the market that you can train with.
Got it.
So they're going to train, abduction across your chest and off the chest. So there's a Twitch trainer that I think is quite. And Mach 3, they always come up with strange names for their equipment. The Speed Bomber 1, I think, or something. But they do a single arm trainer. Now, one of the other things, John, that I found, I didn't see anyone else doing it, but I definitely found worked really well. Go back to super speed and the speed sticks, yeah? Mm-hmm. I did them one-handed. So I started doing them one-handed. I started left-handed, right-handed. and I don't see anyone else measuring this, but for me, it's a must. You measure at the beginning your left arm speed, you measure your right arm speed. They're very rarely the same.
Yes.
One's slightly dominant. The secret of doing it, I've found, is to get both arms up in speed and to get them both at a similar speed. Okay. So I start that with Twitch Trainer or Mach 3 to get some motion going. I've even found a Frisbee is all right for giving some people a basic idea of left arm speed, yeah?
Okay, yes, yeah.
But that's only working in the plane of abduction. There's no vertical movement. You can't throw a Frisbee downwards, but it gives at least someone the basic feeling of what they're doing. What I then do is I take the speed ball. Once I've got the super speed, usable speed in my arm, I then train my left arm and my right arm on the speed ball, hitting objects. Yeah. And for me, that definitely gives you a bang for your buck in speed. Okay. So I would train independent arm speeds. And then talking like we did earlier, John, if someone's watching this at home and they think, well, I don't really want to change my swing, this is something that they can do at home, which will definitely add speed. And if their friend looks at them, they've got the same model, it looks the same, it just works. It just works faster.
Got it. Okay. And so when you see the arm moving, you're trying to get the arm to literally run off the body this way. You're not necessarily trying to keep the body.
Again, we know different styles, so you could, stood up, but you can analyze the abduction. We also know that the arm moves in this plane, and we know that people like Westwood obviously has his arm a bit more that way.
Adduction or adduction, abduction, and then some of the Westwood stuff.
Yeah, so basically what I'll be looking for, I know that ultimately I want to get this to move a little bit quicker.
Yes.
In my sort of brain, I'll be thinking, what in the backswing could I do to get it into a decent position to do that? So I'm looking for a good stretch across my legs and my hips, good stretch across my rib cage, and a nice stretch across my shoulder complex on the way back. And also the right shoulder, as we talked earlier, is going to have a little stretch. Then I would just work on trying to sort of, if I call it, catapult it off my chest to try and get some speed off it, yeah?
Yeah, good.
And I found that really helps to build up some lead arm speed.
Okay, good. I unfortunately spent time hitting balls with a towel under my arms because that looked pretty cool years ago. And I would say that is an absolute kiss of death from a speed perspective.
It might be all right to hit a wedge with, yeah?
Okay, yeah, I agree with that, yes, yeah.
Yeah, but maybe not to get the maximum. One of the things that we'll see is that the arm speed through the shot is greater than the rib cage rotation. Mm-hmm. So with the tail under the arms, this would make sense from a swinging point of view that to hit a wedge shot, there might be some benefit in getting your arms to work at the same speed as the rotation of your body. But we know that the really good players, their arms work more than the rotation of their body does, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Certainly the long drive guys, the one thing I noticed many years ago is that as they get to sort of this position, their right arm might be driving towards their body, but they've got this amazing position where the right arm actually gets past their body's rotation, this one.
Yes, yeah.
You only see that in the really fastest guys, the long drive guys. You see it a bit on tour. So Cam Champ does it, I know Dustin Johnson does it, but the arms want to be moving faster than the body's rate of rotation to get speed out of the system to the other end, which is the first thing you said right at the beginning.
Yeah, good. Okay, good. I mean, I for me, this is awesome because I sometimes when you're doing what you're doing, you're not sure the answer is correct. And
sure.
And me talking to you, it's like, okay, I'm nodding my head most of the time because these are things that I've tried to do. And candidly, it goes against the vogue of what a lot of teachers would tell you, because I find at the highest level, they usually have enough speed. But like you said, the tour player is trying to control where the ball's going. So some of this stuff, they're not pushing the envelope on that much.
No.
Because they're already up here, aren't they? They've got what they need.
So certainly, as we were saying, the tour players don't really need to do it. Tour players are very often one or two changes away from losing their tour card. So
yes,
they might not fancy changing a couple of things. But, you're talking about things being in vogue. Everyone's saying, this Dustin Johnson or John Rahm, doing this is fast, but all the long drive guys do the other way. Yeah, but that's not trendy. There's a bit of a trend. Everyone's arms have got to go in and left, but a lot of the Hall of Fame great drivers, their arms go more outwards.
Yes.
So I think the coaching has these little trends, and I'm probably the only man who could say this. That a lot of people, I can't believe John Rahm swings it 116. So in my world, that's quite slow, yeah?
Yes,
For a man, he's a big man, 6'2". He's a big man. He's got big, strong backside on him and big, strong legs. He could hit it. He could hit it miles. He doesn't need to because he's long enough, and I think he's the most efficient driver on tour from Smash Factor and that. But yeah, I'm the only man who could say that 116 is not really fast. Though, I'll probably teach 50 guys, 20 miles an hour faster than that. So, but he does what he needs to do on tour, and he's the world #1. So, why would he change it?
Yes, yeah, and he's I spent some time with him because Dave Phillips is a good friend of mine, and he's a strong kid, but he's creating a lot of speed in a very short area. Whereas if we take that area further, I think there's some stuff that came out with his right foot. He was born with a foot that is turned in, and so I don't think he can load too far to the right. That's part of the issue.
And I saw a bit of interesting 3D data with him as well, John. That, do you know this sequence of unwinding hips, then torso, then arm? He was unwinding it in a different sequence. His arm was going faster, so he wasn't in the classic 4-3-2-1 sequence. And from 3D, not everyone fits into that. But I think he was unwinding. So 4-3-2-1 as in hips, torso, left arm. I think he was doing it in the 3-4. It was the other sequence. He wasn't unwinding in the classic sequence, which would make sense off a short swing because his arms went before his torso's rotation.
Yes, yeah. And so you mentioned a minute ago about like how some players are pulling this way. I've been telling players that the club is going with such force away from them. The players are actually pulling towards them. It may not look like it, but to go around in a circle, you can't walk with the object. You've actually got to, there comes a point where what I'm trying to say is we're swinging the club, we're moving the club, but at some point that thing gets the energy, doesn't it? Then it's actually trying to start moving you. Would that be something that you've seen? If I see a lead leg issue, I know I've got a problem. If they have the inability to stabilize there.
We know from the studies that Sasho McKenzie's done stuff that the average player, when they swing a club, the club is going to become the weight of a sledgehammer. He did a famous video of trying to swing a sledgehammer. Now, you took, say, a long drive guy who's probably, I don't know this is a fact, he might have 2 sledgehammers on the end. Now, this is going to pull them completely towards the ball, so they're going to make a counter movement the other way to stand up. And for me, that's partly why a long drive guy jump backwards to counteract the fact that the club's going forward. And also very often why amateurs, when they swing, they go with it and fall towards the. They don't know how to make a dynamic balance, let's call it. They can't make that counter move to go the other way with it. And you'll see this in talking about other sports and javelin, hammer throwers, in the guy with the ball and chain, the hammer thrower. That thing is pulling him into the net. So he's got to make, you want to be leaning back like this, trying to go in the other direction. So very much in that hammer throw type of way, if you've got a fast object pulling you one way, you need to make a big counter move the other way to make an adjustment, as it will pull you forward.
Yeah, and that's I think when people pick up a golf club, it's so light relatively, they don't understand that. I talked to Sasha about this. The weight of the club doesn't change, but the effective force that you're having to apply is a massive difference, isn't it?
Yeah, and we also know from a power perspective, John, if I stood up here, that the shape of your hand path, the really big hitters, as it stops going out and down, at some point it's going to be going upwards. And we know from the kinetics ideas that the net force of the handle is upwards through the shot is a big power supply. And we also know, secondly, that from left arm horizontal, we know that there's force under the foot. The movement of the left shoulder up, back and around is a huge power supply from this part of the golf swing. So you better have a good movement to get the force on the handle working correctly, which seems weird when the club's going in the other direction, yeah?
Yeah, it's very weird too. I mean, people see it, but it's very weird for them to feel it and conceptually get it, because they're trying to stay down through the shot. I was like, no.
Yeah. And then that will be confirmed by their friends at the weekend when they tell them to don't keep their head down. Yeah. So it's being reaffirmed every week to them. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's a timing of that club going around them. I'm going to let you run, Lee. I appreciate you doing this. I know Thursdays is your day off in theory, and I've got you doing this, and I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing some ideas. And I'm coming back to England in a few weeks, so I'll let you know, and hopefully I can get to see you in person. But this was awesome. So I'd love to pick your brain some more.
Thanks for having us on, John, and I really appreciate that. And obviously, if you're over in a few weeks, it'd be lovely to catch up. Yeah. Yeah,
they're great. And just you have some online stuff now, don't you? So just where can people find you?
Yeah, so I've got my website's leecoxgolf.com, called Force and Flow Golf. .passion.io. That's Force and Flow Golf. And basically, it's if you were looking to add speed, you could go on there. I do it with my colleague Steve Furlonger, who's probably one of the world leading expert on ground reaction forces. So we have his section. So let's say he does a below the ground, I do above the ground.
Got it.
So there's a program you can follow on there. There's content added all the time, and there's a fitness part and other bits to it. But it's a really good resource to find out how to add speed, because there isn't that much on the internet, as in all together in the same place.
Yeah, good. No, and you've done it. Like, there's a lot of people with theories, but you've actually done it and got a track record with it. So that's very cool. Lee,
thank you, John.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. I appreciate you, and great chatting with you.
And you, Johnny. Thank you, mate.
Bye.